Welcome to the kickoff event for the APhA Foundation Women in Pharmacy Committee, and Happy American Pharmacist Month. We are excited to have so many of you joining today. I'm Elizabeth Johnson, board member of the APhA Foundation and chair of the Women in Pharmacy Committee. We have a couple of housekeeping items to go over before we get started. First, please remember to keep your microphones muted throughout the panel session. You may use the chat to make public comments throughout the panel and to connect with other attendees via the private chat function. Following the panel, we will have a Q&A where you will be welcome to raise your hand, and once called on, you can unmute your line to ask your question. We will also be monitoring the chat for questions during that time as well. The Women in Pharmacy Committee is dedicated to ensuring that the outstanding achievements of women in the profession are recognized and celebrated. Through activities sponsored by the committee, we hope to provide resources related to leadership development, networking, and balancing the demands of career and personal life. Our umbrella for Women in Pharmacy is inclusive of pharmacists, student pharmacists, and pharmacy technicians. Further, men are welcome to attend our events as well, as collaboration with and support from our male colleagues is important. And I'm happy to notice that there were a few men signed on as we were waiting to start. So welcome everybody. For our kickoff event today, we are celebrating the past, present, and future of women in pharmacy. Dr. Metalou Henderson, Professor of Pharmacy Emerita at Ohio Northern University College of Pharmacy, has written extensively about the history of women in pharmacy. Dr. Henderson will help us remember our past. Pharmacist Teresa Toll is the owner of Bay Street Pharmacy in Sebastian, Florida, and the current president-elect of APhA. Teresa will share how we are committing to our present. Kennedy Erickson is the current national president-elect of APhA ASP and a 2023 PharmD candidate at Washington State University. Kennedy is our panelist to talk about investing in our future. I'll have each of our panelists share a little bit more about their backgrounds as we get started. Metalou, can you provide the audience with a brief overview of your background and your involvement in chronicling the history of women in pharmacy?
Yes, I received my 3 degrees from the University of Arizona. I've been a community pharmacist, a hospital pharmacist, and certainly spent many years as a pharmacy educator. I became interested in the history of women in pharmacy because I was asked so many questions and I didn't know the answers, so I had to find them.
Thanks, Metalou. Teresa, can you tell us a little bit about your background?
Sure, thank you. I'm so exciting to see so many people here tonight, by the way. Just love seeing all your faces. So many of you I missed connecting with at the annual meeting. So let's hope for San Antonio next year. So yeah, I'm a pharmacist for every 30 years. I graduated from University of Florida. My primary practice site is independent pharmacy. I own an independent pharmacy, as Elizabeth alluded to. As far as my background within APhA, I actually got involved pretty early in my career. Was elected to the community and ambulatory section at the time of APPM. And I've actually served as a delegate to the House most of the last 30 years. So I've always been really, really plugged in. So I consider APhA to be my pharmacy home. I just really, truly love advocating for pharmacy and advocating for our patients. And I'm just super honored to be the incoming president-elect behind our president who's with us tonight, Sandra Liao. I'm also a wife to my husband, Joe, and we have 3 children.
Great, thanks, Teresa. And we'll talk a little bit later about how you balance all of those things. So our third panelist is student pharmacist Kennedy Erickson. Kennedy, what would you like the audience to know about you this evening?
Hi, everyone. Like Teresa, super excited to see you all here. Super honored to be a panelist for this event. I go to Washington State University, so I'm over on the west side of the country, and I work in community pharmacy, but I'm a huge advocate for all fields of pharmacy. I'm particularly interested in pursuing maybe psychiatric pharmacy when I graduate. And I was really, really excited to be invited on the Women in Pharmacy Committee. Women in STEM has always been a passion of mine, and I'm just excited to talk more about it tonight with you all.
Great, thanks for being here. And thanks to all three of you for sharing a little bit of your background so people can get to know you a little bit better. And I'm reading the chat. I'm trying not to have ADD while I read the chat and moderate, but we have somebody from Germany who's joining us in the middle of the night at 1 a.m. So if we were giving prizes for who came the farthest, that probably would be the winner. So we hope and plan to make it worth your while to be up in the middle of the night. So again, thank you all for providing your background, and we will get started with the questions. And our first question is going to go to Metalou. The APhA Foundation has a portrait wall of women in the Women in Pharmacy exhibit and conference room at APhA headquarters. Metalou, can you give us history of how that came to be?
Yes, I'd be very happy to. The women that are on the wall were selected to recognize the special achievements that they had done during their important period of time. So if you notice, we started out with the colonies and come forward, and they did many things. Was it innovative practices? Were they entrepreneurs? Were they educators or whatever? And it was a long process to find these women and to decide that they would go on the wall. And we wanted to be sure that they were very representative and that we could well document what they did. And I think you might be seeing a slide about now with pictures of those. And of course, if you have to realize the first two were very active prior to photographs. So we have just their silhouettes.
Great. And as Metalou mentioned, we've been scrolling these photos of the women portrayed on the wall. And we also have a word cloud with a word or two describing the background. And obviously one word or sentence doesn't begin to describe the contributions of these women. So Metalou, can you share history of one or two of the women who are on the wall and how their work has contributed to the legacy of women in pharmacy?
Yes. I have to admit that after I have worked so long with all these women, they're like my ancestors, my sisters, my aunts, and so on. If I had to pick two, I would pick first Zeta Mary Cooper. She was an educator. She was very active in the early years of APhA and also AACP. She was the founder of Kappa Epsilon fraternity, and she is a co-founder of Rho Chi Society. She was someone that was so influential and talking to men who worked with her that if she asked them to do something, the immediate answer was yes. They never went against her wishes. The second woman I would talk about has to be Gloria Niemeyer Frankie. And of course, she's very special to me, as she is to many others, because of how much she influenced us. She certainly was my mentor. Gloria was very active in hospital pharmacy. She also was very active in APhA in both instances, primarily as staff members. She and her husband, Don Frankie, were a power couple who did things all over the world. Gloria was the first woman to receive the Remington Honor Member Medal, excuse me, from APhA. And she is really quite often referred to as the First Lady of Pharmacy.
Thank you so much, Metalou. I know when we were talking about this program, Metalou said it was really hard to narrow down to one or two people that she would talk about. And there's so much that could be said about all of the women. And one of the things I'll remind everybody at the end, but there is a separate video that Metalou has done giving a little bit more information about each of the women, and we'll give you some details about how to access that a little bit later in our program. So Teresa, I wanted to ask you, and thank you for your donation and support of the Women on the Wall initiative. Can you share with us why you chose to support that program? Oh, mute.
Thank goodness the computer pops up and says that, right? Thank you. So yeah, absolutely. I think mostly really because someone asked me to. And I think we learned that a lot along the way, but many times just by asking. But because of my longevity with APhA, I've been able to just make a lot of lasting friendships. And one of our past presidents, Karen Reed, who was very involved and instrumental in starting the Women in Pharmacy Conference Room and Initiative, asked me if I would help serve on the committee many years ago. So that was exciting to be part of that initial committee, to even, help make decisions about what the conference room itself would look like. And I don't think I was involved in who was on the wall, but it was still fun to be part of the fundraising process for that. I had my very first boss when I was in pre-pharmacy in a hospital pharmacy was a woman who was this only one of two in her pharmacy class. So, it was just always fun to listen to her talk about what it was like to kind of be in a quote man's world at that time and just be inspired by her. So I think that I love this Women in Pharmacy initiative to also be inspired by all the women that have done so much and just laid the groundwork for us, and also help set that expectation that we continue to move forward and to grow this profession and to inspire others. I was able to go, I was actually at the APhA building last weekend and was able to go back into the conference room and actually see these pictures in person and look through the notebooks that Metalou's put together and the committees over the years. And I just hope that everybody will have a chance to go at some point and see the tribute. And I'm super excited about who the next people are. And if it's okay, Elizabeth, one of the people on the wall that I really admire is Mary Louise Anderson, who was a former speaker. So can I give a quote of hers too? Okay.
Absolutely.
Leaders are called to stand in that lonely place between the no longer and the not yet, and intentionally make decisions that will bind, forge, move, and create history. We are not called to be popular. We are not called to be safe. We are not called to follow. We are the ones to take risks. We are the ones called to change attitudes, to risk displeasures. We are the ones called to gamble our lives for a better world. I used that quote in my speech when I was Speaker of the House of Delegates, and I just love that. So I wanted to share that this evening.
Thanks, Teresa. Another question for you. As president-elect of APhA, you've chosen to be a leader for our profession. And you talked just a little bit about that as you were introducing yourself, but can you give us a little bit more detail about your leadership journey?
Yes. So I was active in associations when I was in pharmacy school, but not I really wasn't in any leadership positions per se when I was in pharmacy school. So when I got out, I really just wanted to be involved. I wanted to be involved with other professionals. So I literally just started going to my local pharmacy association and joined the leadership there. And as fate would have it, one of the members of that local pharmacy association was a person by the name of Red Camp, who was currently the Speaker of the House for APhA. So that was my good fortune to meet him just shortly out of pharmacy school. And he saw something in me that told him to plug me in. So that really helped a lot with my journey. And that's how I got elected at a national level at a relatively early point in my career. But my path continued on to be ultimately the president of the local and then the state pharmacy association. Then I moved on to Speaker of the House for APhA and ultimately to where I am now. So I would just say that I really got hooked. And as I mentioned, I'm super passionate about advocating for pharmacy.
And I think some of your comments also reinforce the issue around networking, which is something that the Women in Pharmacy Committee has as a priority to help women, but just staying connected and networking, because you never know who it is you're going to meet.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And also to just enjoy the journey. I had a past president who just told me that, one of the best parts of serving at the board level are the people that you meet and those lifelong friendships that you develop. So, enjoy the journey. Don't be in a rush. Just continue to serve, like Metaloo, look at her, continue to serve your whole entire career and stay plugged in and involved in some aspect. And you can move around from one to another, but yeah, absolutely. Networking is so critical.
That's great. Thank you for sharing. So Kennedy, you're a third-year student. With all you have going on in the last couple of challenging years, what made you step up to leadership roles?
Yeah, so both like internal and external motivators have kind of given me courage to step up into leadership roles within the past year. And some of those external motivators have been encouragement from my family, my friends, and some incredible mentors that I've met along the way who have kind of challenged me to take risks and think about what I'd like to do in the future. I'd also like to specifically thank my APhA ASP chapter at WSU for supporting and motivating me to pursue leadership opportunities within this organization, as I think it's just been so valuable as a student pharmacist. Internally, the pandemic is really what actually kind of motivated me to run for this position, as I saw kind of the health disparities facing marginalized communities and the mental health challenges that people were facing. And I resonated a lot with what APhA and APhA ASP has been doing to kind of dismantle these disparities, and I wanted to be a part of it. So I kind of got out of my comfort zone there, and I want to help encourage others to do the same, to have the courage to change and make the world around us a better place.
Excellent. So you're obviously busy, trying to balance school and leadership and hiking that I've learned about you over the last few weeks. So what makes it easier for you to engage and balance your time?
I'm laughing because I'm thinking of the time I went on that hike and I just couldn't even get on camera for our meeting. But yeah, it's a lot easier to engage when I'm working on something that I'm passionate about. And I've learned that as I've gone through pharmacy school. And I've gotten a lot of advice as a student, to never close any doors, to say yes to opportunities. But I also think it's equally as important to set boundaries and not overstretch yourself. So I've learned how to say no to things that won't benefit me and my eventual career goals and where I'd like to head in the future. And I think through setting these boundaries and keeping a few planners, I've been able to engage in activities that I love, like hiking and hanging out with my family, in addition to having time to be a student and devote time to being in APhA ASP.
Can you give us an example of a time without naming names or anything, but just an example of when you've had to say no or felt that saying no was the best thing for you?
Yeah, so I feel like it's hard now too because you really want to see people, but with COVID and everything, it's still kind of weird. But when people have asked me to maybe go hang out after an exam, sometimes I have to say no so that I can go take a mental break for myself because that's what I need at that time.
Okay, great. Thanks for sharing that. And Teresa, how about you? How do you balance your responsibilities to leadership and your professional and personal life? You mentioned your family, so all things personal against professional.
Sorry, I thought I hit it that time. So like Kennedy, I think that you absolutely just have to be intentional about it. So in today's busyness, it might even be scheduling that time. Like you literally block off a day, block off a certain time of day and just say, this is time for me. And if that's a break from social media, if it's just being alone, like Kennedy said, sometimes just getting away from everybody else. I mean, I own an extremely busy independent pharmacy. The phones ring all the time and I'm always needed. So sometimes just being alone at night is a nice break. But one of the things I've definitely done is carve out time for my family, a lot of times on the weekends, and then also, trying to make sure I have that. And I'm also blessed to have a great team that allows me time away. So, make sure I go to my teenage daughter's volleyball games, and, I always make time for that. But finally, just my faith, I've been a Sunday school teacher for about 20 something years. And so Sundays, I'm always at church. I get to teach first graders. Nothing like those hugs and, that's really great for a mental break for me. And it also makes me take the time to prepare for that as well. So that's just something that I've decided I'm not going to compromise on. But again, it's back to that intentionality.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to switch gears just a bit and go back to Metaloo. And I'd like to ask you how you feel men can support the development and engagement of women leaders, and what works in your experience and what doesn't work well.
Well, if we look back over the years, of course, when there were fewer women in the profession, it was the men who encouraged and mentored our early women leaders. They worked with them and so on until they got to their role. Of course, time has changed as we look at the fact that our profession is becoming very much female. And I guess we can have any number we want to talk about, since depending on whose source you look at, it's anywhere from 55% up of even the practicing pharmacists now are women, especially in the younger groups. So I think we're at a point where everybody should be helping everybody. And maybe it's time for women to pick some males and mentor and encourage them so that they will continue to also be active in our profession and not feel that they're being closed out.
Great point. Yes, as we have changing demographics in the profession. Teresa, Kennedy, do you have anything to add to working, collaborating with men, how we can engage together? Either of you?
I'll echo what Metaloo said. I think, the value of mentorship and friendship and collaboration is just so important. And it's very important for us to let men know how they can support us as well as women in the profession, as I feel like, awareness is a very crucial step in, making a difference.
I would also add that, because of the way the profession has been, as I already mentioned, men have been our mentors, and we have been super fortunate with that in many cases. So from my professional journey to also even in my business, I mean, my business partner was a male who just really helped me learn and grow. So I like Metalu's idea of just making sure that we're mentoring those around us, no matter who they are, male and female. And recently there has been also some buzz in the profession just about some discrimination that has happened. And I love the fact that so many in our profession, men and women, have stood up and advocated for those changes to take place so that we are not seeing the discrimination against like women in the workplace. So super thankful for the way that men have indeed supported us in that initiative.
Great. Thanks all of you for your perspective on that topic. And again, so glad that we have men joining us today, because in no way is this intended to be an exclusive forum. So Kennedy, I'm going to come back to you and ask how you envision your professional engagement over the next 1 to 2 decades. You're involved very early in your career, and we certainly want to see you continue to be involved, but how do you envision your role going forward?
I'm really excited for my future in pharmacy. I am really excited to engage with my state association and my national association, APhA, to continue advocating for not just our profession, but our patients. And I would love to be in a position one day to empower the next generation of students to continue doing that, because no matter how far our profession comes, or even the field of healthcare, our patients will always need someone there fighting for them. And I just want to instill in future healthcare providers that it's our duty to be the voice and for the best interests of our patients. And I have that quote there that every student pharmacist committed to making a difference in the profession is considered a leader. That's resonated with me since day one and really drew me to APhA ASP. So.
Great. So Metalu, how would you have answered that question about envisioning your professional engagement when you were in pharmacy school?
Well, we would have to start by saying, of course, there weren't very many of us then. So definitely we were the minority, and we were certainly encouraged by the males. But I think it began with my getting involved with activities at the College of Pharmacy. And then as I graduated, I wanted to be a very active practicing pharmacist, doing things for the community and for patients and so on and so forth. And I also wanted to be very involved in pharmacy organizations. And yes, I think I have done that. Have been very active. And just to go back, someday I'm going to learn how to say no when I'm asked to be involved with one of the pharmacy organizations.
Just don't say no to us.
Oh, no, I'm not, things that I'm already committed to, but I'm just thinking maybe it's time, as I'm getting a little bit older, to not come up with new things to do. I will continue certainly with women in pharmacy.
Excellent. And Teresa, how do you think you would have answered that?
When I was in pharmacy school, I'm not sure. I don't think I knew exactly what my role was going to be as far as activity in the profession. I think I've benefited. I mean, I always knew that I wanted to be a pharmacist, I think from like 7th grade. I think that sometimes just even the circumstances around you when you're in the profession are what push you to want to get involved. So by seeing something that you think, gosh, this is so stupid, why do we do it this way? And just really getting out there and talking to people who make those decisions, from regulatory bodies to legislators. I think that, sometimes that'll light the fire. But I think that I intend to stay involved for the rest of my career, and possibly even when I'm retired, I hope. And I think that it's important that that we embrace the changes that are happening in our profession right now and continue to push ourselves and the rest of the profession towards more clinical care. And I just think that's the direction that we all need to be going, is what can we do to improve the circumstances around us. Some of the prior pharmacy leaders like Bob Osterhaus and Jim Powers in Florida have taught me over the years that if it's good for patients, it's good for our profession. So I think trying to keep patients at the focus and advocating for them is always going to push us to do to grow and to do such a better job within our profession.
Great. And I think as we are involved, I remember when I was in pharmacy school, I transferred into the PharmD program, and the first semester, had said, nope, I'm here to go to school. That's what I'm going to do, heads down. And that lasted one semester, and then began to get involved. And I've reflected over the years just how more enriched my life is professionally and personally because of the involvement in the profession. I mean, even Teresa, you and I wouldn't even know each other if it weren't for APhA. So, just it's so valuable on so many levels to get and stay engaged in whatever shape or form that looks like, whatever's right for people at whatever point in their life. So thank you all for your answer to that. Kennedy a couple of times talked about the pandemic and how that even being in the pandemic has motivated a little bit her getting involved. So Teresa, I think I'm going to direct this at you. Any advice for women who took leave during the pandemic, and what advice you might have to get them re-engaged in their careers?
Well, I think that the pandemic in a lot of ways has accelerated pharmacy practice, from opportunities in telehealth that didn't exist before to all the authorities that have been given to pharmacists under the public health emergency, things that we've been advocating for a long time that all of a sudden somewhat fell in our lap. So I think as those who might have taken a little bit of a step back, just make sure that you're looking at all these opportunities and try to jump in wherever you can. If you took a step back and you're just staying home, there might be some opportunities to work remotely. I mean, we all know that that has expanded tremendously. So, but, again, we have had just this great opportunity to advance our profession really quickly. Of course, APhA is continuing to advocate for provider status, which you've probably heard to the point of not wanting to hear anymore. But, and Congress hopefully will listen to us this year. But the cool thing is that provider status is kind of happening because of a need, and pharmacy, I think Scott likes to quote that pharmacy has saved the world. So Scott Knorr, our CEO, pharmacy is literally saving the world. So I think to women, I would just say, where is your opportunity to jump in these new authorities that have been given to us and participate?
That's great. In just a couple of minutes, we're going to open the lines for people to either raise their hand or type questions in the chat. But before we do that, I want to end with one question that I'll have each of you answer, knowing that Metaloo's in Arizona, Kennedy's in the Pacific Northwest, Teresa's in Florida, so a wide swath of our country. So we know the proportion of women in pharmacy has been increasing over the last 2 to 3 decades. We've talked about that earlier this evening, but I'd like to hear each of you share any thoughts you have about how we can specifically recruit women of color into the profession. So Teresa, are you okay with us starting with you, and then I'll go to Metaloo?
Sure. I think that there's a lot of different ways that we can do that. And I think some of it is just being, hands-on, like getting out and meeting people. One of the things I did early in my career is go do career days, go speak to students when they're trying to make those decisions early on. I'm almost afraid to say this, and she's not a woman of color, it's my daughter, but my 16-year-old, my 17-year-old this week, has all of a sudden pivoted back to wanting to be in pharmacy, and she hasn't said that since she was 11. So I'm super excited. I hope I don't jinx it. But I think it's because she's seen all the cool things we've gotten to do in the last year and a half, I think it's a very exciting time in pharmacy. So I think telling our story more, and in any way that we can do that. So in person, by going to do career days, or making sure that we're talking about it a little bit more in social media and in forums that we're in. That's one of the ways that we can do that.
Great. Metaloo, what would you like to add to that?
I would certainly say going out and meeting young people and showing them what pharmacy can do. Career days are part of it. I think the other thing we should be doing is connecting with the colleges of pharmacy to say, I'll be happy to go with your faculty members on a visit to a high school, to a junior high, or whatever, because I think we have to show what we're doing. And I can't say, look at what I'm doing because I'm retired, but I can certainly talk about what I've done in the past. And I think another thing is to encourage our colleges to have special events for middle school individuals. For example, the University of Arizona with Dr. Ted Tong does a wonderful thing in the summer called Farm Camp. And it's normally young people, many female, not all, of various backgrounds who are learning a little bit about pharmacy. And it's been amazing to see, if you track those people, how many of them have ended up in pharmacy school. So
that's great. And Kennedy, what's your perspective on getting more women of color involved in the profession?
Yeah, I think as Teresa kind of alluded to, pharmacy schools can make intentional efforts to reach out to, students who are in high school, students who are in middle school, specifically in communities that are of people with, Black, Indigenous, people of color neighborhoods. In addition, I think it's important for College of Pharmacies to not only talk about their diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, but also the resources available to mitigate barriers to going to pharmacy school, like financial resources being a large one.
Okay. Thank you all. I think we'll probably be talking about that more as time goes on, but thank you for your perspective. And thank you for all of you for answering the questions we created, and now it's going to be time to open up to our audience. What you've provided so far is advice we can all use, whether individuals on the line today are technicians, student pharmacists, or pharmacists. So at this time, we'll take some questions from the audience. Feel free to type your questions into the chat or raise your hand and we'll unmute your line to ask a question. Olivia Welter, who's the APhA Executive Fellow, will help me moderate the chat. Olivia, can you share more information for our attendees about the Q&A?
I certainly can. Thanks, Elizabeth, and good evening, everyone. Thanks for attending the panel. I hope you've enjoyed it so far. We're really looking forward to hearing all the great questions that you have for our panelists. To raise your hand on your Zoom panel, there's a reactions button, which has a little happy face with a plus sign. You can click that, and there's an option to raise your hand that will bring you up to the top of our video queue so that we can call on you to unmute your line. And right now, I'm not seeing any hands raised, so we'll go to a question in the chat. I have someone asking, how can we get involved in / serving the committee? Elizabeth, I think you would be great for answering this one.
Thanks. So yes, there's the Women in Pharmacy Committee. I would encourage you to send either myself at ejohnson@cwo.com or Olivia. We'll send our emails out. Let us know you're interested. The committee just started, so it's a brand new committee that started in March. And we have about 12 individuals serving that are beyond just the foundation board. So we would welcome participation in helping to plan events such as this. So I guess the simple answer is let us know you're interested, and we will work to find ways to keep people that do have an interest, to find ways to have them participate.
And it looks like we do have a hand raised now from Farah. So Farah, you can go ahead and unmute your line and ask your question.
Thank you, Olivia. And thank you to the panelists for the great discussion so far and the insights that have been shared. So one of the questions I had touches upon something that all three of you discussed, which is mentorship. So many of us, some of us on this call have experience mentoring others. Others may not have taken that step. They've been mentees for quite a while. How do you suggest that we make that transition to become a mentor? How does that process begin? Any insights you want to share with us, and maybe like how rewarding the process has been for you? Anything you would share there would be really helpful.
If I could start, I would say over my career, I kept looking for people that had promise to help mentor them. And the result of that has been my watching many of my colleagues and pharmacy students after they graduated, in turn mentoring others. So I think you kind of, as a mentor, you have to have a mentee, but you have to teach the mentee how to mentor, to pass it on.
I love that, Madalu. I agree. As I mentioned, I think my mentor kind of saw a spark in me, just that interest, and I've had other mentors. It's just Red was specifically very instrumental in my career. But I think that we do see that spark, right? We see those students that are active and involved and always asking questions. So I think I'm going to use the word intentional, but making sure we spend time and talk to them and give them opportunities to spend time with us, just following along, seeing what we do. But also, I think as they are approaching us as well, making sure that we always make time for them, following up, what questions do you have? How can I help? And it doesn't always have to be a lot of time, right? It can just be that you're there when they need you. I have so many former students that I've worked with who do not hesitate to pick up the phone and call me if there's like a major career change or, whatever, but they feel comfortable. And I think that's what it's important, that we make them feel comfortable, that they can come to us at any time, and that we're going to help them and just give them wise advice. But I love what Metalou said too, that we teach them how to mentor others. Pay it forward.
Kennedy, anything you'd like to add?
I feel like Metalou and Teresa really took the words from me, but yeah, I just think encouraging students to partake in leadership positions and kind of just showing them, like what their strengths are, because sometimes they don't see that in themselves, and just, giving them the confidence to pursue different opportunities, I think is really huge. And I know for me personally has been pivotal in my pharmacy school journey.
Great, thanks. There is a question here from Sherry Peister. Does the foundation have a scholarship to encourage diversity? And I don't know exactly the full context of the question, but I do know that there is a Mary Mutson Run scholarship that is not exclusive to, but has preference for underrepresented minorities. And Olivia, I don't know if there are others that I'm not thinking of.
The Mary Munson Run Scholarship is our main scholarship that we have to support the development and education of minority student pharmacists within the profession. So I can drop a link to that in the chat so everyone can learn more about that scholarship.
Okay.
So Elizabeth, just to add to it, we've got a whole number of scholarships that are named after individuals from different backgrounds. And so while they may not be targeted to a specific type of individual for the recipient, if you look at the recipients that have received those scholarships over the years, they have been a very diverse group. We've got the Bob Gibson Scholarship, we've got the Alvarez Family Scholarship, and so we've got a number of diverse individuals who have sponsored those or who it's named after.
That's right. Thanks, Mitch, for the additional information.
And we're also looking for others who have named scholarships as well. So if you're interested, let us know.
Great. Thank you. Thanks for the question, Sherry. So we have a question from Salma Matwali, who says, I'm a PGY1 community pharmacy resident. I'm struggling balancing saying yes to opportunities while saying no and setting boundaries. Any advice how to keep that balance? So maybe we'll start, Kennedy, with you, and maybe Teresa, if you have any follow-up.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think it's something that takes practice. I don't think it's something that happens overnight necessarily. But I think for me, it was a matter of writing down what my goals are for the present and then for the future. And then whenever an opportunity does come up, I kind of think about it for a moment instead of saying yes immediately or no immediately, and just figuring out, does it align with the goals that I have for my present and my future? And if it does, I say yes. And if it doesn't, then I politely decline the opportunity.
Teresa, anything to add?
Just that Kennedy has so much wisdom. So I actually had, I had actually typed a response to Salma much along the same lines, that you have to look at, how those opportunities work for your short and long-term goals. So if that is an opportunity that might immediately benefit you, then, perhaps you want to do it. But if it's something you're still interested in, it doesn't mean you say no. Maybe you just say maybe later, right? It's something you put on the back burner and hopefully it's still there. But definitely learning to say no is not something that I'm good at either. So I'm not going to give a ton of advice about that, but I think that, helping prioritize it is the best way to do it. So great answer, Kennedy.
I think one thing I've learned over the years is when I get approached with an opportunity. Sometimes it really is an opportunity. Sometimes it's a veiled opportunity, but nevertheless, to ask what the time commitment is. And I've been surprised how many people that do the asking don't have a ready answer, which might be a warning sign. It's hard to say, but you always want to ask that too. So you're not over committing. You have a better idea of what the commitment is. So that's just kind of a tip that I've used over the years. Olivia, do we have somebody else?
We do. Yes, we have Christine with her hand raised. Christine, you can go ahead and unmute and ask your question, please.
Hey, thanks so much. My question is about networking and how it is really important for women to network and to help us get some of those leadership positions. And as we know, during COVID, that's changed. So I guess I'm looking for the panelists. Can you give one networking tip from each of you that everyone could use? And it can be something you've done pre-COVID or pre-pandemic, but also something you're thinking about that might be able to be used in the future. Thanks so much.
So whichever of you would like to start.
I'll start. I think one tip is follow up immediately after you meet someone, making sure, somebody that you think is a person that you want to stay in touch with, that could be important to your career, but just making sure you reach back out and cement that connection. So whatever way that is, if it's email, if it's a cell phone, if it's connecting on a social media platform, but just making sure you touch back right away and say, gosh, it was really nice to meet you. I so enjoyed that we have this in common. Is it okay if I reach out to you in the future for, something that's of interest to me, or if I have a question or something along those lines? But I think just reinforcing that you met that person and that they were very important to you.
Metaloo, what advice do you have about networking or experiences you'd like to share?
I would say what Teresa has said is very important. And I know that one of the things I used to try to work with my students with was to see that they met someone and then go through what Teresa says. You follow up on it, and then through that person, you're going to meet somebody else. And it was especially important when they were at APhA, because it was an opportunity for me to introduce them to people and start that networking. And you sometimes just have to go up to somebody and say, hello, I'm Metaloo.
Yeah.
Oh, let's talk.
And Kennedy, anything you'd like to add?
I think during COVID, it's been really important to use kind of every opportunity as a networking opportunity. So when you go to class and you talk with your classmates, when you talk with your teachers, let them know what you're interested in, and they can always, connect you with people that may help you achieve your goals in the future. And I just think even having a guest speaker in your class is a great way to network. Send them an email after class and let them know that you found what they had to say really interesting and you'd like to learn more, and maybe that person will become your mentor. So
great, thank you. So we probably have time for just a couple more questions. So I have one, and then people, if you have one more, anybody that has additional questions can put it in the chat or raise their hand. So Amy Walker, and I think I'm gonna see, Kennedy, if maybe you can answer this one. What advice do you have for those who are having trouble overcoming obstacles, for example, passing the NAPLEX, struggling in school, finding their branch in pharmacy, being newly licensed, et cetera? So any advice for overcoming obstacles?
I think the first thing to do is to reach out for help. There's nothing shameful about asking for help, and having someone with more experience than you help you to overcome those obstacles. There's a lot of wisdom out in our small world of pharmacy, and I think just having someone, anyone, a teacher, a peer that you can lean on is important. So I think I've seen a lot of comments too, just having a mentor in pharmacy is crucial.
Great. And there has been a suggestion from Sherry Peister about setting up a network from everyone who participated tonight as a start to networking. So great suggestion. We'll take that back to the committee and staff and see what we can do with that. Olivia, do we have any last questions before we close?
I did receive a question through direct messages that I can ask to the group here. I think it was in relation to an earlier question about mentorship. It asks, how do we mentor minority women pharmacists in leadership? So I don't know if someone wants to take that one first.
Well, I think that we have to seek them out as well. So I know that we have been trying to encourage more minorities to be involved in leadership from APhA. It's definitely been on the platform of Sandra this year as president. It came through our House of Delegates a few years ago too, just the importance that we need to really be working on having more of a focus on getting minorities and a lot of different committee positions, and also even in our awards process. So I think that we need to be looking for every opportunity to see those students that are active and involved and trying to encourage them. And I think a lot of the things we talked about earlier, being active in social media and going into the colleges of pharmacy and getting to meet those students and just being encouraging. So it takes a lot from us we need to really be reaching to them.
Thank you, Teresa. And I think with the comments and the questions, you've all given us some things to think about as a committee for future programming. So I appreciate that very much. So it's time, that hour went fast. It's time to wrap up. And so during this evening's session, you learned about the women who were selected almost 10 years ago to be portrayed on the wall in the Women in Pharmacy exhibit and conference room. I want to take a moment to recognize Joy Donaldson, who is one of the original honorees, and we are fortunate to have her with us on the call this evening. So Joy, thank you so much for being on as part of the program, and thanks for all you've done for the profession. Thank you also to the Women in Pharmacy Committee for their assistance in putting today's program together. I'm pleased to announce today that we will be launching a campaign to select the next 10 women on the wall, the names of which will be unveiled in the fall of 2022 to mark the 10-year anniversary of the conference room dedication. A nomination form will be opened in November. If you have someone you feel should be considered, please go to the APhA Foundation website at aphafoundation.org to learn about the initiative. You may also use the number on the screen. I know I've seen a lot of texts thanking people for donating this evening to the Women in Pharmacy initiative, and up to $300 will be matched. Thank you so much to all who have made made donations this evening. Your donation supports current and future efforts that contribute to the advancement of women in pharmacy in all areas of practice and celebrate the achievement of women throughout pharmacy's history. We're grateful to have received your support this evening. Thank you to our panelists so much. It was a great program. Thank you for participating. Our Women in Pharmacy Committee will be planning more activities, and the next event will be March 18th during APhA 2022 in San Antonio. If you have feedback from this event or suggestions for future programming or would like to get involved in the committee as we talked about, please contact Olivia, whose email has been put in the chat. Metaloo also provided an extended history of each of the women and organizations honored within the Women in Pharmacy conference room, and you can keep an eye out for that also on the foundation website, on social media, and it will also be emailed to all the participants in the future. Thank you so much for joining us this evening for this event, and we look forward to seeing you in San Antonio in March. Thanks and have a good evening.